So much better. Welcome to Nycosrpg. I'm Jonathan Albin, your host, and this is Game Master's Guide. Tonight we have a big show for you, and we will be staying on until I complete everything I'm trying to say this time. I endeavored to do a series of broadcasts this morning, and they were inadequate. So we are restarting, and so here we go. Today we're going to be talking about the triumphant arrival of Nycosrpg in its entirety, or at least in its initial entirety, should I say. We have finally put together all six of our system books and the Masterbook, so we are ready to begin the preliminary growth of the project toward the soon-to-be announced Kickstarter. What we are talking about here is an alternate way of role play that is intended to bring new players to the hobby and to make the entire game play mechanism more accessible to more players, and also to improve the output of game masters by making it easier to make their games excellent. So if you like what this idea is, this concept, make sure you hit all the buttons down below so that the algorithm knows that you are part of our community and that you are therefore part of our audience. Today we're going to be talking about each of the system books, how they relate with each other, and more importantly, how they fit into the grand scale of what Nycosrpg is intended to be. So in particular, this project, as well as everything that I endeavor to do, is actually targeted to creators of role-playing worlds. Yes, and to include those that are writers and narrators in general, storytellers and speakers of all kinds. But it's specifically targeted to those who are creating new concepts and new processes that haven't been seen before, and give you an opportunity to really make those stories your own. Most of the properties that are produced in the role-playing mechanism right now are either the property of a major corporation whose intent is to keep you playing within their mechanism and therefore keep you within the framework of their intellectual property, or it is new designers who have their own intellectual property they wish to promote for your use. And Nycosrpg is a different animal. We are trying with this property to provide every game master, every creator, the opportunity to make their own world within the parameters and framework of role-playing in general, and thereby provide means for the more fluid transfer of information in the game and the mechanics to become more simple and easier to continue to use session after session, and even as you go from one adventuring world to another, and so on. Furthermore, the concept is to make it easier for storytellers and creators to define that which is new and exciting to them, so that the players in their system can also see the innovation and the creativity that is there, and therefore we expand the number of new creators and new game designers out there, because the mechanism of Nycosrpg is so open for use that it's just simple for you to include and incorporate what you're doing with your game world. So the question becomes, what is Nycosrpg? Well, the source from which it comes is my own campaigns within role-playing. I've been a GM, as I've said before, for more than 50 years, and all of those adventures do not necessarily fall within the purviews of the fantasy setting of Nycos, but the concept of the mechanism originated there, and hence we're going to be using that as the name of the property. It is a happy happenstance that Nycos also could be an acronym for not your clumsy old system, because the mechanics of the game simplify and streamline the very mechanics of how decisions are made and how mechanisms are established, so that that uniformity can be spread across different genres evenly while allowing each individual genre to hold on to its own unique pardon me, mechanical existence. The further thing about the Nycosrpg is that it is a game system that can be either a saddle or a replacement, depending on where you are in your personal play mechanisms. It's intended to be, initially at least, a means for understanding the very concept of what saving throws are, and we'll talk about that more in our other videos. And if you go to Nycosrpg on YouTube, so it's youtube.com/@Nycosrpg, you'll be able to see many of the videos that we've done, and I have entire playlists dedicated to creating and understanding how the Nycosrpg mechanism works. So check those out, and I'll link those below as well. Now, make sure I look at the right camera. Yes, okay. The old adage goes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And so the question would be, if the Dungeons and Dragons as a mechanism, if the fantasy systems that are available right now aren't broken, why would you need to create a new one? And if so, why now? Well, the reality is that the mechanism has been broken for a long time. Almost every game master I know has some sort of a challenge with the way combat works. The development of the very large hit point pools that a long-term campaign tends to justify makes it harder and harder to play through a scenario without an undue length of time for the combat to occur. And there are other mechanistic issues, such as the inability to have a fight scene end without lethality. And therefore, the system is broken and needs to be maintained or repaired. And in this case, the break in it is pretty much irreparable, only because the mechanism itself so much depends on that very combat mechanism. So the reason to change it is that the way we think about conflict and combat has changed over time. The style of fight scenes has radically adjusted. One of the ways to compare this is to think of old fight scenes in the 1960s and 70s with the great roundhouse punches and such you saw when you were watching, say, a John Wayne or Clint Eastwood movie, and in today's movies when you're looking at a John Wick or name your action hero now. The combat mechanisms have changed, the style of fighting has changed, and our focus on outcome of the fight has also changed. And so we need a mechanism that captures the cinematic, the speedy nature, and rapid resolution that we can't find in the classic Dungeons and Dragons mechanism. Furthermore, most GMs would acknowledge that the magic system of Dungeons and Dragons and other properties that are available now fall flat in that the storytellers don't have a solid explanation for how magic works, how it interacts with the real world, and how the players either do or don't have agency to create their own magical effects. The mechanisms in Nycosrpg are dedicated actually to that very premise, that the style and flavor with which players engage in magic is solely up to the players themselves, and a mechanism that says yes to the style and design efforts that the players want to make is almost a byword. It's almost required to have some style of magic development in the hands of the players under this new system. But the really driving engine of Nycosrpg over all of the other systems is that it recognizes the prismatic effect of roleplay. Fundamentally, the light that shines through an adventure and provides the image of what's going on in the story is the prismatic effect of each genre. So as the genre gives a tone, a flavor, even a temperature, and a style to the session, having a wide panoply of possible prisms gives the GM and the players and their own mechanics of the game to make the game feel like the world as you intend it to be. And therefore, in the framework of the Nycosrpg Prism, there are, at least to start with, 6 genres. Now we have more than 20 that are in development, so there's going to be a lot more expansion to it, but at least initially there will be these 6 genres to choose from. Now that doesn't mean you're limited to them. As a matter of fact, many players, many game masters and directors will choose to utilize more than one, maybe even 3 or 4 of the various system books to adjudicate their games, because they'll be able to therefore merge these concepts into a singular or perhaps multiple directions of their own stories. For example, Dark Shards is the original genre system book that we created, and it was actually the first one published even before the Masterbook, because it included the general Masterbook rules on top of the basic development and the expansion thereof in the enhanced edition of the magical systems. And that is, how do we determine how magic works, what styles of magic are there, what kind of creativity can be brought to bear on the creation of magics, and how does that fare in the overall framework of the game session and the world itself. So in this case, the Dark Shards fantasy setting is the first of 6 that that are already now available with the new stuff. Now I'll be putting the links to the purchase of the materials down below if you are interested, and for more information about these you can also check out Nycosrpg.com, which is our website, and Nycosrpg.info or info, because that's where our data lore is currently collected. Now there's so much more to be talked about, so let's go on. The second of the system books that will be that is available right now is Downshift, and Downshift is the post-apocalyptic setting. Now initially it was created with the idea of running all of these games in the Terran future storyline, but I have players who have been playing Nycos for a while that would like to see the same thing apply to any futuristic setting, so therefore it could be a world of Nycos, Dark Shards into Downshift. So therefore you're dealing with a road warrior type storyline, but you're merging that with the fantasy realms that you've created under Dark Shards. So it gives perhaps a different flavor or taste to how technology works in the future, if it is instead predicated on powers that are derived from magics. But it's not required. So you could actually run a straight up post-apocalyptic road warrior style mechanism within the Nycos framework, and it'll work just functionally perfect for you. It has therefore all of the tropic sites, scenes, settings, and such that you would want to include in your post-apocalyptic world. Pocalyptic, there's a Nycosian word for you, pocalyptic. All right, we'll go back to that later. All right, so the next beyond those 2 genre settings would also be Deep State. And Deep State is modern super spy, techno thriller / modern conspiracy theory chasing mechanism, with the intent on it being the serious side of things, utilizing all of the current and potentially near future mechanisms to pursue the storytelling of those kind of tales. Therefore, things like car chases and the use of parkour or other styles of transit between locations, car chases, I think I mentioned that already, and all kinds of special effect driven kind of things can happen in the roleplay mechanism, and takes into account all the different styles of these espionage agents you might consider. So it's fast-paced, and everybody still uses the same mechanics, so that theoretically you could also again merge them, so that you could have a superhero angled story tied into this. Now, we haven't talked about it yet, but the next of the genres would also be Dawn Soldiers, which is a combination between the concepts of a World War II type setting merged with early or Silver Age superheroes. The idea that the very concept of this superhero advancement is in reflection of the very changing culture of the World War II era. Another of the initial launches will be Dread Signs, which is a World War I tangent tied to the cosmic horror concepts of, say, Lovecraftian or other dark lore. The idea, therefore, of having those stories about mysteries merged with mayhem with mobsters. So it's an interesting little take on that. And let's see, have I gotten them all? Dread Suns. Oh no, Distant Suns. That's the next one I haven't mentioned. And that is the very concept of the space odyssey, where space travel is at the ultra high speeds like that are FTL. The concepts of communication is somehow made more simplified to make it so that the drama is more realistic and allow you to, deal with the overthrow of galactic governments and such like that. So it would fit, for example, those that are favoring either Star Trek or Star Wars or Star Frontiers. Those all those different mechanisms will fit into a realm of Distant Suns, which allows for role play in those space fantasy settings under the same mechanisms, making it easier to learn and faster to interact and play under. Now, some might ask, how did you come up with all of this information? Why is it developing now? Well, the issue is that it's been decades of observation. I've been a game master and storyteller for more than 50 years now, and we have literally tried all styles of play, developed as much different mechanistic tools as we could to make it make sense, which is really kind of the watchwords of the Nycosrpg, is that the system is mechanically adequate for all situations that a game master and players can get into, to allow for the development of that story in an effective and dynamic way that captures the theme and holds the story into the genre comfortably, and yet allows for innovation and development of stories beyond that. And this experimentation includes playing through all different kinds of styles of play, and the realization that simplicity is really the key to having a great time became critically important. And so the game's just dedicated to fast, energetic, and enjoyable play, and therefore reducing the amount of effort that the storyteller or the players have to put in to make the game work. I've mentioned before that the system functions not only as a completely separate system, but it does also work as a saddle or a toolbox. And what I mean by that is, if you are completely comfortable with the game mechanism you're using right now to run your roleplay games, I'm okay with that. Matter of fact, I would recommend that you take a look at the advantages of the Nycosrpg mechanism to see how it might help your game improve. One of the ways is simply by incorporating portions of the Nycos mechanism that work for you into what you're currently doing, not necessarily replacing everything, because I want the game to feel fluid and ultimately yours, but the places where the Nycos mechanism do assist, consider using them as a saddle, a ride along, so to speak. And as you come into those places where your game system runs into challenges, consider using the Nycos mechanism as a toolbox to kind of work through those places that are difficult, to come up with a new and perhaps personal way of doing things. As I've said, I do not want to replace the process or the mechanism that you run your games under, but I want to do is make your games make more sense and have more fun. And so whether it's a single subsystem or the entire gameplay mechanism that you decide to replace with Nycosrpg. Either way, it's a great addition to what you're already doing, and as I just mentioned, it's now available for sale, which it hasn't been yet to this point. So let's now talk about what it's got within it, and then talk a little bit also about what it's not. The game mechanics for Nycosrpg include a new innovative way of developing your persona values using something known as the ramp system. Standing for roll, assess, modify, and proceed, the ramp system allows you to look at the advancement of a skill not as a singular die roll mechanism, but simply as an improvement over improvement over improvement mechanism, and the resolution occurs when you can't improve any further, providing therefore each of the numeric values of your persona to be the best that they can possibly be. I've done videos on the ramp process and also on our quantum die rolling, so I'm not going to go into the details here. Just realize that what it provides for is a stepped advancement that really makes it feel like you're accomplishing as you build out your persona. The second thing that it's got is the relative survival or relative success mechanism, which we've talked about before, which is called QDR, or quantum die rolling. And again, I'm not going to go into the particulars on how that works here in this video, but realize that what those two mechanisms do is provide for a higher feeling of satisfaction with the fight scenes and a much higher agency for the players in determining how their outcome is a result of what they did on the dice. So it's not necessarily creating a sense of accomplishment, but it's giving the players more agency in the description of how those individual die rolls have affected or impacted the outcome of the game. What Nycos is not is a cookie cutter fantasy setting with paint on new monsters. It isn't created with the intent of replicating a system that you already have. As I mentioned before, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and I don't want to undermine or superimpose a new fantasy setting where you'd have to actually do the work of grabbing a hold and redefining the world in terms of what I've perceived. But instead, what I want to do is provide you as a storyteller to take the story that you've been wanting to tell and give it new life by reducing the requirement for you to make it fit into somebody else's world, which again goes back to my basic statement that we want to make our stories make sense. So that's what the system really is not. The next thing it is not is a regurgitation of previous systems that are out there. As a matter of fact, there's very little about the play of Nycos that feels exactly like other mechanisms, because it does use the relative success model of QDR. I will put a link to quantum die rolling here in the video, so that way you can get a feel for what that really means and how that will affect your overall gameplay. Okay, I got through what I wanted to say pretty much that time. That's pretty good. It took me a while, and I apologize for the lack of a video this morning because of it. But the situation here is that the solution to the problems and challenges you have in your game session really is your inclusion. If you are a game master and a creator and you are fundamentally appropriating out to print material your story, I'd advocate instead for you to consider what you would do different, even with the Nycos mechanism. As you will see, the Nycos books, as they are currently in pre-release version, do not have any imagery, and that is almost all intent. What I'm looking for is the ability to help you create your own story and not superimpose upon you what the creatures and the mechanisms and tools and player personas must look like. And by reducing that and giving you instead the panoply of options that you might have, it allows the story to be more uniquely yours and this does require you as a storyteller or even as a player to amplify your involvement in your own story. Consider for yourself what your creatures might look like, what makes them different than others, and utilize the Nycosrpg monstrous creation process to make your creatures your own. This does three things. Number one is it reduces the amount of copycat mechanism, wherein the players can actually learn your monster system by reading meta product and therefore undermining the very concepts of creativity and wonder that you wanted to infuse into your game session. Second of all, it tends to stop the overt ignorance of the players, and by that I mean they tend to ignore input from you, even if you've already given them a recommendation to watch out for variety of creatures and everything. The idea of having a created monster that you can throw at them gives you kind of the agency to bring them back into the story from the standpoint of innocence and awareness that you really wanted to get from them. And then third, you've made a mechanism so that you can choose whether the monster is truly monstrous and is only bent on destruction, or whether it is willing to negotiate and tries to play for power in some way that allows the players to negotiate or communicate with it. There's so much more to be said about that, but the realization here is that the story and its success really does rely upon your involvement. So why don't you take a look at Nycosrpg at the link below, and if you like what you see, you can first line is check out Nycosrpg.com, and the Play Now section there's a free to play downloadable version of the system. It's about 11 pages long, so it's by far much less expansive than as the regular books, but at least you have the access. Beyond that, there's also the PDF versions available at Nycosrpg.com in the shop, or you can go to our Shopify page, which is also down below, which has the really bang-up proposal for our bundled package, which includes all 7 books. And I think you'll see that it's incredibly reasonable and accessible. So I want to thank you again for being here. Make sure you check with us every daily. We're here at 10 a.m. and 11 p.m. generally Monday through Thursday, and on Friday mornings we also do a particularly special show, and then we are also here on occasions for special reports and such. But join us with us when you can. Thank you for being here. And if you haven't yet, like and subscribe and hit all the buttons down below so that everyone knows you're part of our audience. I'll see you in the next video. I'm Jonathan Albin.